everyone, hey, how are you doing? This is the 82nd episode of Everyday Eternal, and tonight it's Callum Smith and me again. Callum, how have you been doing? What have you been up to, man?
Hey man, how's it going? Yep, I'm pretty good. I've been quite busy recently. As we all know, like, we still can't go out and play cards properly. I'm missing Paper Magic a lot now, actually. Online, I still love it, but it's not quite doing it for me, so I've been buying a lot of new cards and stuff, and trying to find some other things. I've been playing lots more Warhammer. I saw Boss Krenko of Bog Boys fame over the weekend, and he taught me how to play Warhammer properly and thoroughly crushed me. Can you guess what army he plays?
You guys are playing Warhammer 40k, right? The space feature. Are there like space goblins or something like that?
Yes, maybe.
I would guess.
Yeah, there's orcs. Orcs are just like space goblins.
Space orcs. What are you playing?
I play Death Guard, which are like the smelly, disgusting Chaos Space Marines. So the joke is they're kind of like Nick Fit. They're slow, but they're resilient. They're like black-green sacrifice Nick Fit stuff. So
you're basically playing Nick Fit against goblins. It's been a while since I've seen that.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good description. So I've been doing that, learning the rules. I've been playing a lot of Cube with friends. We've got like a Cube we've been building recently. Some cool themes. We're playing online, and then recently built it in paper. I played a little bit of Legacy as well. Last time we mentioned that kind of Land Sharks deck I had an idea for. And I tried a few leagues, and it felt very, very promising. So it had a few weaknesses I could see straight away, but I need to work on that more. So maybe in a few weeks we'll have do well with it somewhere, maybe.
And then it's going to debut and wreck the format or something?
Yeah. Well, Shark Typhoon it's riding this wave, this like Typhoon wave, obviously. And it's starting to see play in other decks now, and I think it's going to be a big player in the Legacy format.
So actually, maybe we should discuss that in a future podcast, but I wonder whether just the card Shark Typhoon itself is so good that we can actually build a couple of different decks around it.
Because, I think so.
I don't know, like, I mean, it started out as a meme, right? But you guys are playing like 3 copies of that in the deck. And
it's just good. I mean, you can play, imagine playing in Elves rather than like Crater Hoofing or whatever, like something lame that loses to Stifle. You can just cast a Shark Typhoon. I was about to say that loses to Stifle as well, actually. But I called it. We're okay.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, the card, I don't want to get too deep into the card, but what I appreciate about the card is that it's so hard to remove in a deck where you don't really want to bring in like that much actual dedicated enchantment removal, which I guess enchantments have always been the hardest thing to remove in all of Legacy aside from basic lands. And I guess that's part of of course it also adds the additional factor that you can always cycle it away and get something out of the deal. And with how slow the format is right now,
it's got this nice like split guard where if you're playing against a deck with Pyroblast, you don't want your win condition to be blue, so then you just keep cycling it. But if your opponent doesn't have access to Pyroblast, like in a 4-color no red snow deck, then you can just cast it and they die to sharks.
Yeah, that's always been the nightmare of a bunch of those decks that there's a card, like of those non-Pyroblast decks, that there's a card that really dominates the end game. Because we talked about Nickfoot just a moment ago, and Nickfoot usually can somewhat dominate the end game, but now there's this enchantment, and even if you try to do something about it and they have the force of will, they still get like a giant shark out of it.
Yeah, so I'd love to do like a deeper dive on Shark Typhoon at some point. But in the meantime, we've got a lot to talk about tonight. What have you been up to? I'm
really enjoying the summer in Munich right now. On the weekend, I went to the beer garden for the first time in basically last year. And it was like a rather not tiny beer garden, but they spread out everybody very far. Everybody was wearing masks. So we had a really nice chill time there, even though the food was weird. I ended up having pizza at the beer garden. Like, okay.
But that sounds lovely. Like, I've been to the pub twice here now in the outside, and they're all spaced out, and it's so hot in Europe right now. I'm just like sweating here currently. It's like roughly 30 degrees most days. I don't know about, is it the same over there?
Way beyond 30 even. Like we're hitting 35 easily on a lot of days, and yeah. How do you call it when it's like really warm but also really humid? Like we have a special word for that. We call it schwül.
We just don't even say words. We just complain.
You just go. You just draw from your mouth. You're like water.
We just moan. Like English people are so used to complaining about everything, and especially the weather. You just make noises at each other, and everyone understands you perfectly.
you got certain grunting noises associated with certain types of weather and stuff. It's like, okay. So I want to see what the weather forecast on English TV is like. That's just going to be somebody like, tomorrow it's going to be like, and the day after it's going to be, okay. And,
yeah.
and
but you can just universally complain about the weather. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that
but you
works.
have a nice summer in your city.
Yeah, really enjoying that. The other thing I'm gonna do is this Sunday on the 16th, I'm gonna be casting the NRG series from the Nerd Rage Gaming tournament. I guess they call them NRG series. That's what they do. And Joe Lossett, like super old school legacy player who kind of vanished for a while, but now he's back big time and he's been beating me with goblins quite often on Magic Online. And Anurag Das, little known streamer, you might have heard about him. He's actually the biggest legacy streamer in the entire world, I think. We are teaming up and we are casting that event. So definitely check it out. Twitch TV/NRG series. So that's what I'm looking forward to. By the way, I already posted about it on Twitter. Did you know that last week we were actually the 41st gaming podcast in Japan? That's just like one of the most random things I ever learned.
Where do you even find these stats out?
I sometimes get emails because I said, that's probably an entire podcast in itself, but tracking podcast metrics is one of the most stupid things in the entire world. And I probably went on a rant on one of my recent streams about that. Like, you actually have to pay money for people to track your podcast metrics, because then you can use those to appeal to sponsors and stuff. And or I guess you could do it on your server side if you host it on your own server like we do. But that's, at least for now, it's beyond my capabilities. I guess I could read about that. So I signed up to a lot of like trials here and there, like, hey, track your podcast for free for like a couple months. And that was really great. And then those run out. And then they try to tease you with, oh, by the way, did you know you were the 41st biggest gaming podcast in Japan? And I guess that means English speaking, right? I can't believe that we're the 41st biggest English. Yeah, but there's probably like a ton of Japanese.
Well, I was going to say, if they're trying to hook you in, do you trust the numbers they give you? Maybe they're just making up. Like, everyone's the biggest, the 41st biggest.
No. We last week we were the 39th biggest in Italy and all-time top 40 in Norway. But we are not ranked in the US. Like, the US is too big for us to be ranked, so that makes sense. Like, the bigger country, the less likely we are to be ranked.
Well, I wonder how many podcasts Norway has.
Well, we are not really a Norwegian podcast, so I guess
they have 39 podcasts in the history of Norway. And so we're in the top 40.
I guess it means like people in Norway downloaded us the 40, like all-time top 40 as a gaming pod. So that would mean that people in Norway actually enjoy, cool. I guess legacy and Magic more than in other countries, because it didn't really get any all-time stats for other countries.
I wonder if we can get some good sponsors from these numbers. Like, so you put it on Twitter, maybe Delver Chat Twitter sees this and sponsors us. That'd be sweet.
What do you get by Delver Chat?
If we can get sponsored by Delver Chat, I'd be very happy.
They're gonna send us like a lot of ponders and preordains and brainstorms and stuff, and like, this is all for you.
I think to get in, you have to like they do a what's the play, and you have a turn one, you can play a Delver or a Ponder, and you have a one lander, and you have to submit the right answer.
That's you know the Stormbards? Are you on the Stormbards?
No, I used to look at them, but not anymore.
They had that thing where you actually had to apply for it, and you either had to have like a certain number of finishes to your name, or I guess they did an interview, or that was like a screening process. So you couldn't even read the Stormbards. I
remember that, and I remember not getting in the first time. And I've always been terrible at Storm, I admit it. And so I kind of made up some things and stuff. I think I got on eventually, but I kind of really like that idea. I know it's not commonly accepted to like this kind of stuff. It's very gatekeepy. Yeah. But I like the idea of some quality control. And if it's a small closed community, you're just like, okay, well, we just want to chat with the people that we trust to like be very informed and things. I mean, Storm has that kind of mystique. You can imagine all these like necromancers, or, well, I guess they're not necromancers, they're dark magicians in a big tower, and you can only get in if you answer the right riddle. It's kind of cool, flavorsome. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And speaking of sponsors, by the way, big shout outs to our new Patreons. We got Martin Nielsen. This is so weird when you start to pronounce people's nicknames in real life. Neville Shut. That's how I was imagining him to be named. But
yeah, I'm not, because is he from Holland? Is it
Martin?
I think it's Neville Suter.
No, he's from Scandinavia.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
Is he? Oh, Denmark.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Martin. I can't remember, but actually, I'm not sure how to pronounce it either. Let's get him to tell us, because he's been very chatty in the Discord. So people should join for the Discord. It's really as they say, popping off. Yeah, we're chatting about some really good things.
Yeah, really been enjoying that.
So I'm going to ask him how to pronounce it.
So Martin subscribed on our top Grizzle brand tier, and we had Trent Bowsers who upgraded his subscription to an Eternal Witness tier. So thank you so much for your support, guys. You're basically like... That sounds a little bit weird, right? The Legacy community is the biggest sponsor we ever had. I mean, they're the only sponsor we have, and they're doing really well with that. So thank you so much for their support.
Yeah. Well.
Moving on, there's some stuff to talk about. I initially wanted to talk about the new deck that was created by Jeff Pokemoki White that has been floating around for like a week or two, actually more like 3 weeks at this point. And people left and right have been picking it up lately, and at least everybody who does well with the deck makes a Twitter post. And I've seen a lot of those Twitter posts where everybody's like, hey, picked it up, went 5-0, picked it up, went 4-1. And that's basically me. Like, I picked it up a couple of days ago and immediately went 4-1, went 4-1 again. Only lost the mirror in one of those runs. The other one, it's so weird, right? When people say, actually, it would have been a 5-0, but I threw it away. It's like, yeah, how many times did your opponents throw it away on your 4-1 run? Anyway.
Yeah, I always kind of roll my eyes a bit at that. I mean, you can be honest with yourself. You can be like, okay, I probably would have won this game if I played better. But it's very easy to, like, when you're making results and you kind of want your results to be higher, if your opponent makes a mistake, you either don't notice it or you're like, well, they made this mistake, but it's hard to say if they would have won or not anyway, so you just mark it to yourself.
That's always like something to keep in mind, right? But I noticed how much it was popping up lately, and that deck doesn't actually have a proper name. I think Jeff calls it RUG Denial.
He's called it like RUG Design Mistakes. Or RUG Denial. I think that rings a bell. But people are calling it Pokepile, which I like because I like it when a name is funny and stands out and it also associates with him who's made it. So Pokepile, I think, is what's kind of sticking, but RUG Design Mistakes is a fan favorite.
At the core, I want to say it's basically we used to have Canadian Threshold for like decades in Legacy, and I guess technically we still have that. But recently, people added a lot of 3-drops to the deck, like Oko and Uro, because those are really great cards, and also like a little bit of a slower but more snowbody threat like Dreadnought Arcanist. And what Jeff basically did is he put back the Stifles that those people cut for these cards. And in order to make room for that, he ended up entirely cutting Delver. He's like, no, we're not even playing Delver in the first place anymore. And I guess we're playing 2 Astrolabes because the mana requirements are pretty steep at times. But we're still also running the suite of like 4 Wastelands and I guess 2 Dazes still. So there's still a very pronounced tempo aspect to the deck, even though on first glance, it doesn't really look like the deck can actually take advantage of that, because the most broken thing the deck can do is, I guess, play a Dreadnought Arcanist on turn 2 and then Oko on turn 3. And I guess there's an even more broken start that involves stifling your Uro trigger, but we'll talk about that later, because that's not why you're playing the deck. It's just a casualty. Like it happens sometimes, and then it drags your opponent. Yeah. But that's a really, really interesting take.
In my opinion, trying to categorize it as a Delver deck without Delvers is not quite what's going on. I think it's just a mid-range deck, basically. And it's using the card Stifle and Daze, especially and Wasteland, outside of what people commonly refer to as a Delver deck or as tempo. And I think it's just taking advantage of these cards being just really good. Like, yeah, Stifle and Daze and Wasteland play well together, and they play well when you can threaten your opponent. But so people historically have been doing that with Delver of Secrets, and it's still very, very good, of course. But he's just using the snowbally aspect of these cards. So as we said, Dreadnought Arcanist, he has Oko, Uro, and Narset. These are the kind of cards where, like, the longer they stay in play, the faster they're in play, and if your opponent can't answer them, they get you additional value. So you're gaining tempo to snowball with these cards rather than just like close out your opponent's life total. So rather than closing out the life total, you're just closing the gap in raw card advantage as the main way to win with the deck, I guess, because I can see it drawing a lot of cards. So it's just a completely retake of how we approach the deck building for fair decks, or mid-range decks, I think. And I think Daze really is like just a good example of it's so good that you can play it without like a turn 1 threat, unless you count Stifle as that. But so, I mean, Stifle's the card that he's gotten a lot of flack for, and I've seen on all these Twitter posts people like, oh my god, if you just cut the Stifles and put 4 good cards, you'd win way more. but he's winning loads with it. And I did ask him earlier today. I mentioned to him we're going to be talking about the deck on the podcast, and I understood what he means by the stifles. I've seen him explain it a few times, but I wanted to ask him how he puts it, because his understanding of stifle in this deck is exactly what the kind of stuff I think the listeners need to understand if they're not sure its role. So he said the base level is that stifle is good versus a lot of the meta right now. So he says snow. So against snow, you can counter Uro draws, you can stifle their fetch lands and hit them off mana, especially colors. I think that's quite important. You can stop Oko things to get ahead in an Oko race. I can see it being important there. Against Storm, you can counter the Storm trigger. So like, it's not going to win the matchup on its own, but it means they have to discard it. And a lot of Storm decks are relying on Veil of Summer rather than Thoughtseize these days. He says Doomsday. It's very good at Doomsday because you can counter the Thassa's Oracle against the Battlefield trigger.
I just did that. Sorry to interrupt you. I just did that twice to an opponent yesterday. And I can only imagine how bad that must have felt. That felt so good, dude. You have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, Doomsday started playing a one main deck Pyroblast and splashing red for this because people play Stifle.
Yeah, that's actually how they managed to beat me, because I'm pretty sure I had something that could interact with basically anything, but not with the Pyroblast, and then they ended up taking a game from me. So that's a smart choice, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very smart. He then says Sneak and Show. Again, like you can cut them off mana. You can counter Griselbrand draw in a bind. I think it's just good against their fetch lands. You need to cut them off the mana. Goblins, you can counter like Muxus ETB trigger, Ringleader, Matron. If they're trying to wasteland you, an important like Vial activation. It does a lot against goblins actually. Esper Vial, same thing. Recruiter triggers. There's triggers everywhere in Esper Vial, so like it's probably overloaded with targets. So he says these are the matchups he says, and he says to name a few. So I think it's a right thing that Stifle just has a lot of targets, especially because there's lots of Aether Vial decks, and these decks all have ETB triggers. Like an Elf is good as well. You can counter the Crater Hoof with it.
I played against Goblins twice in the very first league where I played the deck, and both of my opponents actually happened to be streaming. It was it Goblin Lecky 1 and Turn 1 Goblin Lecky? Like, those names are crazy. Like, it took me actually forever to understand that those are two different streams. But yeah. So I watched the VODs later on. And the Stifers, like, by far were the card who gave them the most headaches, like next to Uro. I told you about this, right? I almost wanted to do a compilation of their reactions to Uro. And then I didn't do it out of respect to them, even though I just want to do it because like the card is so stupid.
I think they would enjoy that out of misery.
Yeah, the misery was very real. But yeah, Uro and Stifle have been absolutely wrecking them. There have been like game states where I was like on 2 life and like no creatures up against like 3 creatures on the board. And then I get Uro into play, and then next turn they play like Ringleader, you stifle it, like they can't really attack, then you attack, they do something else, you stifle it against. Like the Stifles have been absolutely wrecking goblins. And also the tempo aspect is not to be underestimated. Like, yes, stifling fetchlands is great, but also stifling a wasteland is basically the same as stifling the fetchland, because they lose the land drop and you get to keep your land. So you're also like +1 ahead at this point. Or if they spend, say, 3 or 4 mana on a Goblin Matron or a Ringleader, and you stifle that for 1 mana, that's a great spot to be. That's basically counters the creature, even though they played it through a Cavern of Souls. Because, they can have like a 1/1 for 3. There's synergies with that, not gonna lie, but our power, just like our raw power that we present in the deck, is just so much greater. And Stifle has played a big part in beating those kinds of decks. Like I think in all the 4-1 runs I had with it, I barely ever stifled a fetch land. I stifled a lot of wastelands and triggered abilities of creatures. So Stifle is much bigger than what we used to see from it. And I really, really enjoyed it in this deck.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And so maybe we need to just reassess further what we think of Stifle in the format. Like, I also forgot to mention against Sneak and Show, you counter the Annihilator trigger of Emrakul. It's pretty important. There's just so many applications for it. I don't know if there were times when like Eldrazi aggro, for example, makes it look ridiculous. There are decks that just ignore it, but he's right. Currently in the format, there's just a lot of targets for it. So maybe we can fit it in other decks. But I think his shell does take advantage of it well.
That I guess we were going to talk about that as well. This deck, when I see this deck, this is basically what I used to play in Natural Order Bant just like 2 weeks ago. I got 2 videos on that on my YouTube channel. And looking at this list, it feels like Stifle almost plays the role of Noble Hierarch in that regard. That, you know how Noble Hierarch speeds you up so you can do your later game stuff more reliably? And here Stifle slows the game down on the opponent's side, which in effect, like this is the same effect you get from playing a Noble Hierarch. The only difference is it can't be lightning bolted. So it's more like a ram spell that it can actually be removed. And that's why it feels so smooth to get those Uros and those Okos out. And yeah, I guess if you get the Uro out and you get the extra land drop, that's even crazy at that point, especially if it's like a wasteland and you wasteland them. There have been games that weren't even games in the first place where, yeah, you just like Uro wasteland them and they never really recover.
Absolutely. So Jeff's second point he said, as you exactly just described, he said, in this deck, Stifle often acts as a ramp spell. So like Noble Hierarch, like you just said, with the upside that it can't be bolted, also like you said, and can pitch to force at will, which I think seems very important. Like there are matchups where it's going to be poor, and having that flaw of just pitching to force is a really big reason why Oko and Uro are so good, I think, as well, because they're legendary. But like just being blue, all of these cards in the bad matchups, so if you have extras, it's so easy to pitch to forces. And so he says the deck's threats are snowballing, so ramping into them has a lot of value. Narset especially loves a clean board and prevents the opponent from cantripping into the lands they need. So that's also like you wouldn't call it like a combo, but it's just a deck working as intended when you have Narset protected and they can't use their ponders and brainstorms to find lands and you stifle their fetched lands. So they really just struggle to get out of this prison-esque element. And then he finally says, it's less likely to be dead late game since you draw more cards than Delver, and you have the option to stifle the front half of Uro, which comes up more often in sideboard games where opponents bring in Layer of the Void or Rest in Peace. So yeah, it's another like unconventional way to think about Stifle in the way that Delver isn't able to like get over the lack of the loss of cards if Stifle doesn't have targets. You can brainstorm it back, but that's about it. Here, you just, as he says, you just draw more cards and you have these extra uses for it with Uro. So yeah, furthering, like it just plays a different role in this deck. So this is where I'm going to loop back to what I first said, and I think this is a mid-range deck, but just being approached from a completely different mindset of Legacy as we know it now rather than a bunch of years ago. So I'm very interested where he goes with this, of course, and where people go with it, and if RUG are the best colors. Like, as we said about the name, he said it's RUG design mistakes. So we have Dreadnought, Arcanist, Uro, Oko, Narset. So the red is for like Arcanist and Lightning Bolt, and it probably is correct to play that, but you could play other colors, I guess, like Source of Plowshares or Fatal Push.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know. The Lightning Bolt itself, I guess it makes sense, has felt somewhat underwhelming to me in the deck. I could imagine like a lot of other things to be put into that place. And it makes sense in the regard that we don't really put pressure on the opponent, so the reach that it provides is really not that great, even though I guess with Arcanist you get a like 6 damage out of nowhere. But I can certainly, like, if I was to cut something, it would certainly be the red, even though the access to the sideboard cards is really great. The 2 red blasts that we have, and the Clothers especially, like the Clothers has been really good in all these like mid-range mirrors that we have right now, and I don't want to miss that card.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, he must have thought about this, so I'm kind of spitballing here, but like there's 2 Astrolabes, and I think they are, not because the mana is too bad, just because it's a good enough card when you're playing a 3-color deck and it can use the help. But maybe you can play 4 colors if you play extra things. But that's pretty stretching it with Wastelands as well.
When I played it, like the 3 colors weren't as easy as I hoped they would be, primarily because of Uro. Because Uro, those double blue, double green requirements, and you also want to keep your snow turned on for Ice Strength Total, so you try not to fetch too many non-basic lands. So true. The 4th color, I guess you could do it in the right metagame, and it certainly will give you a huge advantage, right? It's just, to me, I'd be more excited to explore maybe what white could do for the deck. There's, first of all, Swords of Plowshares, of course, which is a lot more flexible than Lightning Bolt when it comes to like certain stuff. But
you get Teferi as well.
Teferi. Teferi to me is basically very similar to Narset. In the sense that this deck is like a mid-range deck, and mid-range decks can struggle against like slightly bigger mid-range decks or control decks. But Narset is also one of those cards where I feel like, okay, this is something that allows you to get ahead super quickly until the opponent eventually finds a removal spell for it. Because against this deck, I guess Arcanist can be lightning bolted, but the rest is you're probably not too high on your lightning bolts against this kind of deck, but you probably gotta just keep them in because Arcanist is just such a crazy card. Man, all of those cards are just crazy. I don't know, man. Some people might laugh at me, some people might hate me for saying that, but the more I play with Uro, the less I can actually imagine playing anything else in Legacy right now, because maybe I will eventually burn out of Uro. Maybe somebody will innovate in a way that I'm like, okay, I can't really play this card anymore. But the sad thing is I can't even say that I hate Uro. It's actually addicting, and a huge part of that is the extra land drop. I just like really, really like having a lot of mana and doing all of my stuff. And Uro does all of that. It's the ultimate explorer. Uro the Explorer. I don't know. Titan of Nature's Wrath. Sign me up, man. I wanna do that. I wanna do that every day, all day, in all formats. And the craziest thing is, it's still legal in Pioneer and Modern. Like they had this huge purging of a lot of cards in all of those formats, like Oko and everything. But somehow Uro's still around, and I don't know, man, whether it should. Like I'm not gonna pretend I played those formats.
We tested about this a few days ago. Uro's power level it's obviously an insane card, but I think it's based around how good it can like make a control deck work, like how good the answers are. And here in Legacy we have Lightning Bolt and Force of Will is the main thing, and like cheap interaction, and like you have ways to stay alive. So if you have Uro as this like trumping threat in all the mid-range matchups, you can afford to just play more and more interaction to keep you alive, and you can spend this mana for him to ramp out, gain life, and progress you forward. The problem was he's been legal in Pioneer for a long time, well, since he came out, of course, and he just wasn't good against Inverter or Breach because they just don't care about it because they combo kill you, and his life gain didn't matter in the slightest. And so because the interaction from the Pioneer decks playing Uro didn't really line up against their combos, it was like a kind of a sidelines card. It wasn't played very much outside of Delirium Shells and like Niv Mizzet decks. But since the combo decks have been banned a few weeks ago, we're seeing loads of Uro decks coming pretty much like dominating Pioneer straight away. So how good he is really does depend on the format and what's good in the format and stuff. But it is, I don't know, I'm pretty ready to say it's like the best fair card in every format.
It's the best fair card in every format. Dude, we might already have the headline of this episode. The best fair card.
Well, maybe let me like.
No, you can't go back. You can't go back. It's the best fair. Okay, it's the best fair threat. Okay, I guess I'm gonna say that's less catchy.
Yeah, it's not better than Source of Plowshares, and it's not better than Force of Will.
I don't know.
But but I think it's the best.
I think
threat.
there's a lot of people out there who will tell you that Force of Will is the exact opposite of a fair card, even though I definitely agree with you. But growing up playing Magic, I thought Force of Will was the most bullshit card ever created. Like, Terror my creature, it's fine, but don't Force of Will it.
Force of Will is completely busted. It's one of the best cards in the Legacy format by so far.
It's a great part of why we even get to play the format in the first place. And yeah, I think nobody seriously wants to discuss it. I've seen people who want to discuss the removal of Force of Will, but yeah, that's that's not our podcast. If you want to hear that, I guess there's some special interest podcasts. We should actually launch like a fake podcast where we change our voices and then we like have a lot of discussions about like super weird stuff that nobody would ever believe. I guess nobody would really listen to that. I don't know if that's
Or we could just release them under the names of other Legacy podcasts and just say weird things like, yeah, I think Force of Will should be banned. I think Brainstorm should be banned. I'm going to get so much hate on Twitter for saying that because people do believe Brainstorm should be banned.
Wasteland's a bullshit card. Let's get rid of this. And everybody should start with like 4 cards and play. Like, this is what Legacy. I remember when the biggest discussion on the source was like whether Tarmogoyf should be banned. And look at Tarmogoyf now. Pretty washed up.
The poll is still up in that BNR thread. And it was like 40% of people believe Tarmogoyf should be banned.
I mean, but for historic reasons, that tells you something about the state of the format back then, like what was considered unfair or too powerful back then. Because now, I don't know if anybody who came into Legacy recently would think about that.
Well, Goyf is still played in RUG Delver. Like it's still standing the test of time.
Actual RUG Delver.
It's just not in every deck.
Oh, that brings me to a discussion that there recently was on Twitter. I think Lawrence actually brought that up, where he was like basically spitballing whether Legacy or like rather actual straight up Canadian Threshold with like 12 threats, Days, Stifle, Force, Wasteland could come back. Like I think they played like 4 Lightning Bolts and wasn't even 4 Chain Lightnings. I think so, yeah. So whether there's room for that deck to become back, because like basically he was arguing historically whenever people ended up cutting Delver from a Delver deck in the long run, they would return to it because it just ended up being the better deck. And I have some thoughts on that, but maybe you want to go first. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I've almost already said this. I think this deck is not a Delver deck cutting Delver. This is a mid-range deck being built differently, and it just looks like a Delver deck. I think those kind of Canadian threshold or Canadian decks, however you want to call it, is flawed because Nimble Mongoose is so bad these days. Because it just lines up so poorly versus stuff like Uro and Oko and everything. You can still win some games with it, but there's just so much that doesn't care about it. A 3/3 body is not what it used to be. And so when it's not a good threat, everything you're playing is like then dying to the common removal, to bolts, to swords, to abrupt decays. And so you want to play true names, and then you're going bigger. It just doesn't really work in my head. I don't see it. So the main thing is this is not a Delver deck, is my opinion. What about you?
So the way I see it is that's basically Canadian, even though we probably don't call it Canadian anymore, because that name has a lot of history and legacy to it. Kind of exists. We call it RUG Delver now, and it plays a lot of 3-drops. It plays Okos usually. I'm not sure it actually plays Uros, but it plays a lot of Okos. It often even cuts some Goyfs, or at least it plays some Hooting Mandrills. But it's already a slower deck, and like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't play Stifle anymore. So it's really not that original kind of deck anymore. And at least judging by results we have seen over the last couple of months, the slower RUG Delver deck that still plays Delver is doing decently well, actually, to the point where it's one of the best decks in the format, at least results-wise. And now this deck is looking to like maybe be the even better RUG Oko deck, even though it's, like we mentioned, it approaches from a different angle. It's more like a dedicated mid-range deck and not like a tempo deck that stretches into the mid-game. It's more like a very firmly in the mid-game deck that just happens to play these Stifles, but for completely different reasons. And yeah, that's basically what I'm thinking. Like, people talk a lot about how Uro has pushed out Delver because the life gain and the extra land drop you get out of it is super relevant. And I think that's just like part of all the reasons why straight up RUG Delver, which certainly has like a certain flaw, right? RUG Delver is one of those decks. It can literally beat any deck in the format if it gets a good draw, and the other deck struggles reasonably well. Like, it's incredibly powerful. But on average, it's not doing as much as it used to, even though it had some kind of resurgence, like earlier, like in the very beginning of this year, late 2019. And I just want to say I love the deck so much. I want it to come back, but for everything I know, and I've spoken to a lot of people who are like much deeper into Delver than I am, and everybody tells me, yeah, it's not worth it. You rather still play Delver, play all these mid-range things, because the super heavy dedicated tempo approach is not worth it. And I would think Icefang Kotal might actually be part of that as well, because it's just so horrible if you gotta trade your Nimble Mongoose against the Icefang Kotal. You never really want to attack into that. You also don't really want to spend a removal spell on that, but you kind of have to. So yeah, it's an ugly place to be for a super dedicated Delver deck.
Yeah, very much so. So you could play like a Winter Orb like control deck, as Jonathan Alexander used to preach and stuff. You could attack their mana, like attacking Snow and Uro's deck's mana can work sometimes, but it's hard. They play a lot of lands. As you said, Uro gets extra land drops into play. They do have fairly low curves still. Astrolabe is fixing the mana, so you can't like stifle the right fetch land for the right basic and stuff. Mana Denial is just not what it used to be. And yeah, as we say, Nimble Mongoose is not what it used to be. So I think that idea, I love the deck as well. It's one of those decks. It's beautiful. It was like 52 cards and then 8 flexes or something, or 6 flexes, and it was so consistent over so many years. But it's been gone for a while now.
Now that you mentioned Winter Orb, I think if you want to play the deck, it's probably the approach to do it, because this deck is incredibly mana hungry. Like, I think I either use all of my mana every turn, or I have the potential to use all of my mana every turn and end up not doing it for other reasons, because I might do something else. But yeah, the deck really needs its mana. And if I could only ever untap one land every turn, I could see myself being in trouble. So that's probably like one way, like protect the Winter Orb, something like that, and then protect it with like spell piercers and stuff, because there's not too many abrupt decays being played right now. So that's something I could see. That's probably an approach that might work. That would. You
could also play Veil of Summer if people are on abrupt decay for the Winter Orb. So I mean, yeah, this could be like a play Sylvan Libraries and Winter Orbs, and then just use that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Although there's still the
So where can people find Chef? So since we are talking so much about him, let's actually give him a shout. I think it's at Pokemoki. No, it's at Real Pokemoki. Pokemoki. He's the real Pokemoki.
Yep, cool. Real Pokemoki, not the fake one.
No,
yes, definitely go check him out on Twitter. He posts a lot of legacy thoughts on there as well. He's always innovating and stuff, so he's really worth a follow. He's one of these people you need to keep an eye on because he's never content finding a deck that he thinks is good and then like tuning it forever. He's always building something new, always trying to attack the metagame. So he's really fantastic deck builder.
Didn't he recently do a stream with RUG where they played it together to a top 8 finish in, I think, a legacy showcase challenge?
Yes, so this past Sunday was the last showcase challenge. I think it was the last one. I could be wrong there. It was a showcase challenge anyway. And so Anurag was streaming and he was calling in. They were on like a 5-minute delay. And they were playing this exact deck, the Pokepile. And they top 8'd. I can't remember what they played in the top 8 in the end. But I think it went 7-1, I'm going to say, in the Swiss. So really impressive display. And he, like, watching him and listening to him talk about the deck, he has a really strong understanding of it. He's played the deck a lot. And so recommend going and checking out the VODs and really just following him. He's put out some videos as well, I believe. We could go over the challenge just quickly as well because it was a pretty big one. I think there was 211 players, which is massive.
Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, so just for anyone that isn't aware, the difference between a showcase challenge and a normal challenge is there's 4 challenges, or actually no, there's 8, but there's 4 Sunday challenges every month. And the last one of the month is a showcase challenge. And what that means is all the top 8 get an invite to the end of season, which is every 3 months, end of season, like legacy playoff. And the winner of that gets an invite to a much bigger tournament. It feeds into something, which feeds into something, which feeds into something. But the prizes are good. Top 8ing is really, really worth something. So it was actually won by StefanoGs, who's a known Miracles absolute crusher and boss online. He's been like sticking with Miracles since it like Terminus probably came out, and he's been working in his own way. So it was Bant with Oko and Uro and Coatls and everything.
Is his name actually Stefanos? StefanoGs? I always thought his name was like Stefano Cheese. That sounds like so much cooler.
No, his name is Stefano, but StefanoGs is his.
I'm gonna keep calling him Stefano Cheese. He's from. Is he from Brazil?
Yeah, it's better. He's from Brazil, yeah.
Yeah, I knew it. Stefano Chi, definitely.
So he's back. He's been studying the last few months, and I've forgotten his degree. I think it's to become a doctor, but something like that. And so he's been having a huge time out. And then like a couple of weeks ago, he was like, "Hey guys, I'm back," and then he just like instantly starts crushing everything. Classic. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's an uptick in Miracles now in online play because it's still good. It plays blue-white control cards plus blue-green design mistakes.
There's a really interesting card in his main deck. 2 copies of Dovin Suito in his main deck. And for those who don't know, that's a white and a blue. This spell can't be countered. Counter target non-creature spell. It's basically slightly harder to cast Negate that can't be countered itself. So what are you actually looking to counter with that? So
this has actually come up in talking about it with him yesterday, actually. So he said, about Veto, I like the uncounterable clause, especially in game 1, because there's a lot of cards which I guess you don't have the right cards from sideboarding. He said also it's easier to cast than a normal counterspell. So blue-white is probably easier to cast most of the time. And he says he doesn't really care about resolved creatures. So when you're playing a deck with 3 source of powers, which is interesting, and Terminus is, if you just don't care about creatures, then I can see this being like so much better against RUG Delver when you need to counter the Oko or something, and it can't get dazed or forced back and stuff. So I think this is quite a good innovation. It seems small, but it must give you a lot more game against Oko.
Yeah. I'm just like trying to explore this further. Like I would think this is also something that you can use in the first game against a lot of combo decks when maybe they don't have force. Like it's actually kind of hard to imagine which combo decks don't have Veil of Summer right now in the main deck. The Epic Storm does, blue-green Omni does.
Doomsday doesn't.
Doomsday doesn't. Oh yeah. I guess,
and that has forcible in days.
Yeah, I guess they can discard it, but they don't play that many discard spells if they play Force of Will and Days.
I think it's mostly for the like Delver and Fair Blue matchups though, but it obviously has application against combo as well. Like sneak and show as well if they don't have green.
I kind of like the idea of being able, if you're on the draw, you can still counter Oko even if the opponent has like dazes. So that's actually really cool. Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So moving on, we had in second place we had Death Shadow. Pretty standard blue-black looking list, I think. That's always a deck that kind of pops up and really spikes an event. I think this deck is way better than people give it credit for. It's super low to the ground. Like the threats go bigger into the Delver mirrors. You can get bolted out, so it's a bit dangerous. But especially when Source of Plowshares is on a bit of a down low, then this deck is just a combo killer as well. So if the format is very combo centric, I'd be looking to play Death Shadow if that's your kind of style.
This is actually quite interesting in the sense that you mentioned Swords of Plowshares is not played as much as it's usually in Legacy, which is it's great for the deck, right? Because Swords of Plowshares kills all the Death Shadows in play at once. And at the same time, we are not having that much pressure on our life totals as we usually do in Legacy. So you're safe a little bit, at least a little bit safer than you used to when you go down low in your life. So yeah, that's something I just thought about when you mentioned the thing about Swords of Plowshares.
I don't think the deck is also as bad as people make out against Swords of Plowshares. If you play smart, you're going to play a Death Shadow out, and then the deck has a Stubborn Denial in it, and you play Forces and Dazes and Thought Seizes. Like, you do just play a bit slower, and you do have the Delvers and Gurmag Angler, which they do need to get off the board or they will die. So I've seen some good players really play around Source Splash as well. It's obviously probably the best card against the deck still, but I don't think it's like, haha, you're playing against a Source Splashers deck. This is a buy for swords. It's close. And in the sideboard they have Hymn to Turex, and they have Narset as well, and Winter Orb. Like, there's a lot of really heavy hitters against the swords deck. So I don't think I'd put this deck at like sub 50% versus swords decks generally.
I think the biggest issue would be being able to punch through all those Death Touchers that we have in the format. I guess Baleful Strix actually isn't played that much anymore, unless I don't know. Does Stifle still play like Baleful Strixes and Icefang Caudals? I don't even know, but
no, he cut Strix a long time ago. Actually, I think even like a year ago.
Oh, wow.
And he just said the card is not good enough these days. So maybe he plays it in his Yorion build. I wouldn't be surprised, but in 60 cards he doesn't.
Okay, cool. So what do we have? Third place. Third place is your pretty much, from what I can see, straight up Reclaimer build of elves. That plays one Allosaurus Shepherd. I'm trying to see anything special. Not really. I guess something that's interesting is that initially the deck used to have Cable Pit. Then Cable Pit went away for a while as people didn't really play a lot of what's it called, Plague Engineer anymore.
Espervile.
And now that's the thing. So initially the deck played Cable Pit because of Plague Engineer. Then Plague Engineer went away, so Cable Pit went away. And now that Espervile, which I guess we can talk about later, is really, really big. Like, it's probably the biggest it's ever been in the history of the format, and it's been around for 10 years. Now that deck is there, and we really need to have an out to Peacekeeper, especially if they have Meddling Mage and Abrupt Decay. Now we have Cable Pit, and now we can take that out, because previously the game literally just ended. And yeah, that's almost a must-have if you're playing the Reclaimer build, I want to say. Yeah,
this is a really nice innovation. I think this looks just like Newton's list. I can't see anything different.
Yeah, this is totally straight up the list that Newton has been promoting. 3 Once Upon a Time, Chuka Bok in the main. Yeah, that's definitely the one.
Yeah, it looks good. Cool. Next up, we have RUG Delver. It looks pretty standard. We've got 2 Mandrills, 2 Goyfs, 3 Dotords, 3 Oko. Yeah, this is your RUG Delver, as we were talking about before, the kind of more mid-range one. 5th place, we have Anurag and with the Pokepile, as we discussed before. 6th place, we have Hogak, which is the bug version. And if you look at the full metagame that MTG Goldfish posted about the challenge, it was the second, most played / the second best performing deck. So the first one was RUG Delver at 12.5%. But Hogak is second, actually tied second with Espervile, at 9.38%. So, Hogak did pretty well in this top 32. So I guess there's 3 copies of it, but pretty interesting to see it do well.
Dude, I love the deck. I just we talked about this in an earlier podcast. I just love how the deck is able to punish weak draws. And that's just like
yes.
something I really appreciate about the deck. The deck is also surprisingly hard to play against. Like, I think I've played a lot against it more than a lot of people, and I still struggle quite a bit with like, what's the actual correct thing to remove? And it's not like you have Ooze active. It's like, oh, it's going to be a cakewalk. Sometimes they just overwhelm you with Heatron crap, and that's just like so much going on. And I often tend to underestimate the power of the altar, but recently I just like, okay, let's just turn off the altar by getting something like, I don't know, Nilrod and
Collector Roof. Yeah, Altar
Altar
is like it's just like 2 mana win the game. It is that insane in the deck. Obviously not against like some graveyard hate if they have a Leyline or something, but the card is just absolutely outrageous. And it's no secret that I have a really, really strong soft spot for this deck, so it's always cool to see it do well. This build in the top 8 has actually got quite a few differences to usual. So if anyone is a Hogak fan, the differences are... So it plays a Dryad Arbor, which is becoming pretty stock, but it's not on every single list. But this has 2 Hapless Researcher, which I've actually never seen in Hogak before. So that's really cool. It has 2 Putrid Imp, which is not common in the bug versions. It's common in... the red versions with Faithless Looting rather than Careful Study, which I'll get to in a second. But this build actually has no Careful Study as well, so it's just plain blue for Hedron Crabs and the Hapless Researcher, and we'll get to some sideboard cards in a second. So this is actually, really, as I'm going over, it's different. So there's no Careful Studies, which do get pretty bad off the board, and then it has Putrid Imps and Hapless Researcher. And has the full 4 Cabal Therapy in the main. Some people cut down to 3. And there's also no Once Upon a Time. Okay, so they've done really well. They 7-1 the Swiss. I'll have to give this one a try.
So can we mention what the Dryad Arbor does? I would imagine that the role of the Dryad Arbor is to be fetched to randomly cast Hogak when you only have 1 creature.
Exactly, that's exactly it. You can also use it to fetch up, and like with Altar of Dementia or a what's it called? The sacrifice one? Carrion Feeder. There's no Carrion Feeder.
Yeah.
So it can be used with Altar and Bridge from Belows to get zombies as well. But yeah, it's generally for Hogak, which I think is usually worth it, the inclusion. What do you think of the Okos in the sideboard?
It depends on how slow of a game you actually play. I would love Oko more if it actually answered. I guess it answers Ooze if that types. It answers what's a Collector Oof. That's the initial thing, and I guess it allows you to play a little bit of a slower game against like control decks or mid-range decks or something. They're trying.
I think it's pretty good versus Delver as well.
Oh yeah, do you actually struggle versus Delver with this deck? I guess.
Yeah. So I have played Okos a bit in the deck, and it's been fantastic against the fair decks. Like better than you would imagine. It's weird because they have all these surgicals and Tormod's Crypts and Grafdigger's Cages and Ley Lines, and then you play Oko and some like Bloodghasts and Vengevines and just smack them with some ugly creatures. It's pretty funny. So I think they're pretty good actually.
So you're basically playing a limited deck or like a draft deck plus Oko after sideboarding?
Completely. See, I love scrappy Magic. It's one of my favorite ways to play when like you have all your cards are like at very low strength because of their sideboard hate, but then if they have like over sideboard and they don't have like a strong draw themselves, you're just scrapping out with these 2/1s and they have it's really fun.
That's what I love doing with elves as well. It's interesting to keep in mind if you have Oko and you make an Elk and you have a Bridge from Below in your graveyard. I would think the way it works is if you made an Elk on an actual creature and it dies, then you get your zombie token. But if you turn the food into an Elk and it dies, then you shouldn't get a zombie token because Bridge cares about cards hitting the graveyard and tokens aren't cards, at least last time I checked. Oh, it even says whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so cool Hogak list. 7th place, we have Espervile. Again, doing well. We have Coke MTG doing it. Looks pretty standard to me as well. There's like a 7's Reclamation in the sideboard, and a Snapcaster, which isn't totally usual. But he's been crushing with his deck recently. We mentioned it last time. He said he was on an insane run of like 40 wins and less than 10 losses and stuff. So yeah, carrying on crushing.
I think even less than 5 losses at this point.
Yeah, probably. Just doesn't lose. And 5th place, we have good old Dredge keeping everyone
8th place.
8th place. Fairly, what's the right word? Like fair.
Honest?
honest. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. It looks like the one that has the fiery eyelets. So this was, I think it's very close to what top 8'd the last Legacy GP ever, Bologna.
Thus far.
Dredge top 8'd. Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah. Yeah, I shouldn't say that. So yeah, Dredge, otherwise looking pretty standard with like the blue-red package. You often see people not playing Fiery Islets and not playing Insolent Neonate and both Study and Looting. But yeah, good. But that is a different archetype in the whole of the top 8. There's no repeats. Pretty cool.
Just looking at the other stuff, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. There's nothing that really sticks out as, oh my god, we never really saw this coming. I guess we covered the one that's pretty new. And to me, I was about to say, like, Esper Wild still feels somewhat new. Because it's just like the deck has been around in like Jeff's head forever, since like 2008 even. And he's been playing it like on and off. And just like over the last 6 months or something, the deck has hit the format so hard. And it's probably still one of the top 1 or 2 decks that I would pick up for a tournament. There's a couple of tournaments coming up online, and I might play in some. I haven't decided yet. And maybe I'm just going to stick with Esper Wild because it's been doing me so good. And you're also in our chat about Esper Wild, right? And I think one of the discussions recently has been like the time, that just like playing the deck, the time is a really big issue for both sides of the board. But I don't know, if I'm in a tournament, I don't care about it. Like if I'm casually playing it while watching Netflix or I don't know, YouTube, whatever, then I do somewhat care about it. Then maybe I don't want to play it. But if I'm actually playing in a tournament where I'm like focused and dedicated and like I can maybe even take advantage of my opponent not understanding everything and eventually being put under a lot of time pressure, then that even works to my advantage. So I don't know, for as frustrated as I am with some parts of Legacy, I'm also excited for like a couple of decks, and for those decks I'm really excited about.
Yeah, totally. It is time consuming, but like you say, it's incredibly hard to play against as well. There's this, because with a deck with so many tutors and so many flicker effects for the tutors, there's just so many possible plays that the deck can make. That if you're trying to like play perfectly and play around what you can afford to play around, it really can like wear the opponent down as well into making mistakes. So it is both sides that gets hit with that.
So are you going to play in the, I think there's the, are you going to play in the Energy series, first of all, that I mentioned earlier today? Earlier on the cast. Earlier today.
I'm busy this coming weekend, unless something gets untied up, but I'm away both.
Are you going to be busy breaking Corona rules?
No, I'm good. We've like kind of relaxed enough so that we can see people and stuff.
See and touch people. No,
we're looking like it might get stricter again soon. I'm going to play in the Mana Traders event, which is coming up soon. I think it's just started, actually. It started yesterday. So the Mana Traders event is a Swiss-style thing where you need to play 10 matches and you need to, I'm going to say 8-2 to make it into the next stages.
So I read about it today because they invited me straight into the second stage. Oh, hey, here's to me.
Oh, wow.
So the way it works is you need to have a certain win percentage over a number of matches.
Yes, yeah. Oh, okay. So if you don't 8-2, you can just play more until you win.
8-2, so that would mean like an 80%. I think 8-2 is too much. I read it earlier today. I think you over 30 plus matches, you need 60%. And I think over your first 10 matches, I don't think you need 80%, but maybe you do. Like I actually don't. I thought it was like more like 70%, but I could be wrong. Maybe it was 8-2. And then it feeds into a Swiss event, and then the top 8 is actually going to be played the day after. And then, depending on whether you actually have a subscription on Mana Traders or not, they will basically increase your payout by 10, by times 10. So you can either win like $300 or actually $3,000 if you're subscribed to them. So that's actually a pretty sweet deal.
Cool. Yeah, so I plan to play that. So you're already into the next stage. You don't need to.
Well, if I'm gonna play, like I'm also not sure. Maybe I'm not here to break Corona rules, but I don't know. It's just so hot. I have such a hard time playing 8 hours in front of my computer when it's so incredibly hot. I wonder if ACs are eventually going to come to Europe. Like for as much fun as I make of the US and their waste of energy and everything, I was recently actually told on Twitter that ACs don't actually like quote unquote waste that much energy, like not nearly as much as I thought they would. So. Now at this point, I'm like, actually, maybe we can have those, especially when it's this hot. I don't know, man. But what I wanted to ask you, even earlier...
I'm very lucky that...
when's the last time you actually played Paper Magic? Because I literally don't remember the last time I actually played like a Paper Magic tournament. It might actually have been Bologna last year in like October, November.
Yeah, for me, it was probably not actually very far off when we went into lockdown, because I generally played Legacy once a week in London. But I did also play Cube with friends this past weekend.
So you mentioned that. I thought you played online.
I have felt real cards. We built it and played online. We've done 2 small gatherings with a few friends to play.
Ah, I see.
So yeah, playing with real cards again is something else. It's nice.
Honestly, sometimes I keep a deck here just to shuffle around while I'm playing or doing anything, because I just like really enjoy shuffling. It's just when it's so hot and I'm looking at my hands right now and they're like this so sweaty. I probably shouldn't even be touching cards or even like sleeves, because they would stick together like crazy.
I have 4 cards next to my desk constantly. I throw them away when they get too worn out. I'm always flicking cards. It's a terrible tip.
That's why I have poker chips right now. I don't know if you can hear that on podcast, but this is my new addiction. And I make 2 towers and I shuffle them into each other. And every time I get more comfortable,
I can do that as well.
I make the tower bigger.
I used to play lots of poker, so I can do that.
Oh, awesome, man. Yeah. We have some listener questions that were submitted to us via our Discord. So why don't we go ahead? So my friend Tom the Decker from Belgium, he's got a good question. He's asking, Uro plus Oko make it very hard to play a fair midrange deck that doesn't lean on those cards itself. Decks like Grixis, traditional Esper Blade, Chunt, or Absan all have fallen to the wayside, mostly. Instead, Esper Wild relies on more of a prison game plan, as do Maverick and Death in Texas, I guess if they're still around. So, how could one go about defeating the Simic power cards when playing a quote-unquote fair deck? Going under pushes you extremely hard towards linear decks, while going over the top of Uro Oko is very hard. Oko just eggs whatever you try to do, and Uro creates tempo, card advantage, and a clock all in one. So how do we beat those without actually falling to the sins of Oko and Uro?
I think you need to. I mean, it's true. It is very hard to either not play them or beat them fairly. But there are decks out there doing it right now, like the Sharksteel deck. I think it kind of looks like it doesn't deal with those cards very well, but actually in practice, Standstill has been very good against those cards. We are seeing Delver still beat these decks, like they may be 50-50 or so. I think Esper could be explored more, because the card's called Eliminate, a new one, which destroys a creature or planeswalker with mana cost 3 or less. I think that could be a good option to have to like help beat these cards. You can't beat it with just a removal spell. You do need to pull ahead, but I think they are not completely oppressive to other fair decks. They do, like something like Grixis really relied on Hymn to Turak, and Uro is so insane against Hymn to Turak, so maybe Uro does invalidate that. But these decks don't, like, apart from the Pokepile recently, Jund could play Punishing Fire. That can be good against the fair decks if you have a way to consistently actually then like Abrupt Decay the Okos and Uros. That could work. So yeah, it's tough, but I don't think it's just like one of these hard and fast rules of you shouldn't try and play a non-Uro Oko deck. Is my opinion, basically. Well,
my opinion is that you can't really do that well with, like, because you mentioned a lot of good stuff, but like the actual straight up non-blue mid-range, that's the point, right? You mentioned Delver, but the Delver mid-range deck plays Uro and Oko, so I guess you were more talking about like blue-red Delver, which by the way does decently, like I want to say blue-red Delver is by far the best Delver deck right now, like actual Delver deck, not like mid-range deck that happens to play Delver.
Yeah, I think I agree. Yeah.
But if you want to play like Death and Texas,
the Delver decks don't play Uro. They do play Oko, but not Uro. True. But yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah.
So yeah, for like straight up Maverick and Death and Texas, like it's so sad how little Death and Texas we see, and I wonder how much like the whole idea that even like also we propagate, right, that Death and Texas isn't as good anymore, but it really doesn't feel as good anymore. It's just. I strongly believe that this kind of game plan will come back, but right now it just like feels so weak.
I haven't seen it myself, I guess. Like people are saying Death and Texas is dead. I just haven't seen it. But yeah,
but when people say dead, they usually exaggerate beyond compare, like dead and legacy. What does that really mean?
Yeah.
To me, that means it's like you're much less likely to win if you want to like win a tournament. You can still like win matches and stuff, but you're putting yourself at a conscious disadvantage that's bigger than usual. I think
that's true.
I think actually the best mid-range deck, the best non-blue mid-range deck right now might actually be elves. That's probably where, like, especially the Reclaimer version, which is like much more mid-rangey.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I'd call elves mid-range myself.
I know a lot of people say that.
Do you think Chaos Elves is good right now?
Yeah, very much. I think it's probably like really good right now because it deals well. Like it always was good at dealing with mass removal. It deals with Plague Engineer a lot better than like traditional versions of elves. Even though we don't even see all that much Plague Engineers, it struggles a lot against combo, but combo doesn't feel that super represented. And I guess Doomsday is becoming really big, but even TES, I don't know, that has been my impression lately, that I'm not playing against that much TES anymore, even though I think TES should be like pretty decent against a lot of those Uro and Oko decks, because a lot of those cards, they don't really matter all that much.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it does beat the snow decks pretty consistently. It just, people are still playing other fast combos, and so you can, it's another deck that doesn't play Force of Will, so you can, it's lose to the Griselbrands and stuff.
Oh, Griselbrand, my old friend.
Yeah. But while we were talking about this, I managed to like get my thoughts together a little bit better about this question. And I think the answer actually that I was like kind of digging for is you can't just play good stuff, fair decks plus Force of Will and cantrips. Like Esper Blade was mostly a good stuff deck. Same with Grixis. They didn't really have much synergies. Grixis, I guess, had like Snapcaster, Colligan's Command, synergy to an extent. But they weren't much more than that. I think you need to have a real plan to go bigger. So like Shark still does have a plan. It has hardcast Shark Typhoon against the snow decks. Like that is a real end game. Or the Hall of Healer's Generosity plus cycling the standstill. Like you have an engine there. Like Miracles has Entreat the Angels. That's another thing to go bigger. You need to have something for that. You can't just be playing a Stoneforge Mystic or 5 to 10 million Snapcaster Mages. It just doesn't work. So a more dedicated, focused, fair deck, if you can find that, is probably what I was digging for, yeah.
Yeah, but what would that be? I get maybe it's no, Ninjas isn't really a mid-range deck, right? Ninjas has some grinding components, but Ninjas really only drawn to more Ninjas. Like it's not actually like a mid-range deck.
I think I'd call it like a tempo aggro kind of.
Yeah. But it also wins on card
I guess what I was getting to
is... It doesn't really win that much on like early damage, unless it has those draws where they make like a 4/4 on the first turn, on the second turn. It's also like one of those more...
Yeah, it has those draws, but it has tempo because you just draw these cards, and in those cards you're going to draw a bunch of Force of Wills, so you just tempo them out like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's basically a school of thought that makes people play Dreadnought Arcanist over Tarmogoyf, because while you're not dealing as much damage, you're still putting on a lot of pressure on your opponent, like a strategic pressure. And that's, I guess, what Ninjas is doing. They don't kill you as fast as like a fast Delver deck, but they're drawing so much cards that they tribal you out in a way that also allows them to play Force of Will, which is really awesome, because that's never really done before. I guess in Murfolk it used to be done, but Murfolk is let's not get into that.
Wait, I thought it was coming back and going to be one of the best decks ever last time.
Yeah, but because of the combo, right? Like traditional Murfolk, people used to joke about it, even though I really loved the deck and I played it quite a lot. But it eventually fell off because especially once people built it more like a beatdown deck and not like a cute deck that could utilize Mirror Reachery and all that kind of stuff. At that point, it eventually fell off because it just wasn't good enough anymore. But now that it has the combo, it has an additional strategic aspect to it. And that's something that makes it a lot more like Elves. Mm-hmm. Elves is basically, I'm going to give you that. If I had to say, Elves is probably more a combo deck than a mid-range deck or an aggro deck. And on the other side, we got Merfolk, which is definitely an aggro deck that has a minor combo aspect, which is basically the opposite of Elves, right? There's the big combo aspect that also has like a beatdown aspect. And for Murfolk, it's the other way around. And now that it has both, that's actually something that makes the deck work. And yeah, I think the deck is decent. It's just, it can't do as much cool stuff as all the other tribal decks. Like all the other tribal decks, Goblins, for example. Goblins can do such broken, crazy turns. Murfolk really doesn't do that anymore now that like Reachery isn't a thing. Like Mirror Reachery allowed for some like really crazy stuff. But yeah, I guess Murfolk Trickster is still around.
Right. don't forget you can Phantasm Image True Name Nemesis over and over again.
That's the one big draw to the deck, right? That makes me.
Yeah, I'm half joking. Yeah.
Oh, I'm fully serious. Like when I played Merfolk before the combo, I always used to rock like 4 True Name Nemesis and 4 Phantasmal Images, and that's what I want to do.
Yeah, some decks just completely lose to that. It's quite funny. But yeah, I think the answer, we've answered the best we can. It's tough for non-Uro and Oko fair decks. It's true. The next question is from, it is Scott Monroe, right? Good brother?
Yeah, Scott Monroe, who's actually opening his own shop in St. Louis, by the way. Shout outs to him. So if you live in the St. Louis area, definitely check it out. He sent us pictures and it looks really amazing. So as soon as like all the restrictions are lifted, I don't know how it actually works in the US, but I guess he's going to be responsible about that. And yeah, so as soon as we can have like proper tournaments again,
good luck with that.
That's definitely going to be great.
Lovely. So he says, have your opinions changed on Deaththreat Shaman now that Labour's been legal for this long? Would you welcome it back into the format at this point if Labour's going to stay legal? What do you think?
No, I just don't want it back in the format. I totally see like the reasoning, the thinking behind that, and like it makes sense in that regard, that we surrendered to the multicolor lords at this point, where we say, if you want to play your 4 and 5 color decks, if you want to be Stifle, you can do it. It's going to be okay. Nobody's going to stop you. And now the idea is right. So if we add Deaththreat Shaman, it's actually not going to change all that much, would it? And like coming from somebody who would totally put that back into elves and like rock 4 Deaththreat Shaman elves and just like have such a great time with it, I still have some hope that Legacy is gonna change in a way that we don't do all this like multicolor stuff anymore. And if then we still have Deaththreat Shaman around, then we also gotta get rid of Deaththreat Shaman again. But yeah, if things are to stay, like if things are the way right now and they are to stay forever, like with regards to like Labe especially, then I wouldn't hate Deaththreat Shaman coming back, primarily because it keeps Uro a little bit more in check, actually significantly more, and also what's it called, Dreadnought Arcanist. So Deaththreat Shaman is a really really good card for keeping those in check. It's just like, I guess the Uro decks would just play their own Deaththreat Shamans and then basically just cast Uro a turn earlier.
Yeah, I share your thoughts. I think it's way too good. And I also agree, I can see that I think it might even make Astrolabe be played a lot less in the format, because the decks playing it would just play Death Rates. But I think it's just way too good. Like the fair decks that would use it are already so strong, and it would homogenize the format into like you just have to play 4 color piles and stuff. Like the new cards that have been printed since it was legal are just so strong too. Like you would just play like, it was such an insane Delver deck with Deathrite, Arcanist, Delver as your threats and like 2 Okos, whatever. I would like to see the format with it for a bit. If we could have like an area of like 6 months where they unban it and say, like, look, we're probably going to ban it again. We want to see this. It'd be kind of cool to see how it interacts with Uro and Arcanist, like you say. But I don't know, when we did the Legacy Unchained tournament where we unbanned loads of cards, I think Probe and Deathrite were the best cards we unbanned. Yeah. Like that's including Survival and
that Dig Through Time. Like Survival fell by the wayside pretty quickly, right? People played Survival early on, and then nobody played Survival anymore. And
Deathrite amazed me by how good it felt. Like it felt absolutely insane as it did before. So yeah, I'm pretty firmly in the it should stay banned camp.
I wonder if, well, okay, now the Probe is gone. We're not going to have like traditional Grixis Delver coming back again, because that deck was probably like, when we submitted our decks for Legacy Unchained, I think everybody started like, at least towards the later stage of the tournament, everybody started by having like Grixis Delver and then picking 4 other decks, because that was just like so good. Yeah. By the way, shout outs to Elves, Legacy Unchained, one of the few totally undefeated decks in the format. Just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah. I think it was Elves and Eldrazi were the best performing decks, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're right about that. Eldrazi. I guess Eldrazi is something you can always play.
Eldrazi didn't play a single unbanned card, and there were 2 versions people played, and it lost like both versions together lost like 1 match out of 10.
I guess Eldrazi gets a little bit slightly better, at least relatively to the rest of the format, when people try to do broken stuff, because Eldrazi is okay at stopping broken stuff and punishing people for having a lot of like synergistic cards that need a couple of turns of setup. And that's where Smasher comes in and like goes like smash, smash, smash. And that's just the Eldrazi way.
Yeah, that's very true.
Awesome. So we had a couple points more down below here. I just realized that we talked about most of them, like Bant Miracles, Hogak. I gave a shout out to Blue Red Delver, and even Esperwile. There's Doomsday, right? Doomsday is basically. Can I go as far as to say that Doomsday is the best combo deck in the format right now? Like, who's gonna be angry at me if I say Doomsday is the best combo deck in the format right now?
I think I agree. Unless are we calling Elves a mid-range deck or a combo deck?
Well, to me, the way it plays is it's a mid-range deck that has a combo aspect, but I gotta concede that it probably is primarily a combo deck.
Okay, I think I'd put it like roughly even with Elves currently. Yeah. I think both are very strong. I think Doomsday is the best kind of like spell-based combo deck. I think the deck is absolutely phenomenal, and it keeps putting up some pretty decent results. I think the deck is just pretty hard to play, and it's pretty scary as well. Like me personally, I get very cold feet while trying to play it. I've played it a few times and I'm messing up and just getting worried about it. And like, oh my god, if I mess up the pile, everything goes wrong, I lose the game. So it's pretty punishing to mistakes as well. So it's hard for someone to just pick up and like start learning it.
Yeah, I think
that's why we're not seeing more people play it. But
yeah. I think ever since Oracle, I mean, that's the main reason why the deck has suddenly been resurrected after like 10 years or something. I think Oracle makes the deck a lot easier to play. That doesn't mean it's like easy in the absolute, but a lot easier than it used to be. Because most piles really come down to, I want to say like 2 Cyclers, and maybe even just like if you have a fetch land in play, you can put a land in there to just like thin out your deck where like the thinning actually makes sense. And eventually you just go Cavern and land the Oracle and win the game from there. So there's stuff you have to play around, like we mentioned Stifle and other stuff, but I think that's not something that should really make you shy away from the deck, because it's, I don't know, I feel like the piles where you really have to overcome hate are rather easy, because there's not that much actual great hate. Like, which kind of relevant hate do we like? Recently, I didn't even bring in Nylrod. Like, Nylrod didn't feel like good enough for me. So, which kind of hate are we even talking about? That Gadoktik doesn't exist?
Stifle probably is.
Anything, yeah.
I think Stifle and Meddling Mage are probably the best things. So, like, they're like, Pokepile is playing Stifles, and Espervile is probably quite tough because they play the Meddling Mages. So, you do need something for Meddling Mage. But the deck is just really well built. Some of the people piling it, like, so Ethan Formicella, who's Monkeys Can't Cry, he was the first person to see Thassa's Oracle and start building with it. And since then we have, so like Martin Nielsen, who we said earlier, who's Neville Shoot, he's a genius combo player and he's been working on it recently. We have Romario Vidal as well. He qualified for the Pro Tour with Doomsday. He's just cementing himself. He top 32 at the last challenge that we're speaking of on Sunday with it as well. So these kind of players, they are building the deck together and they are terrifyingly good at these kind of decks. So we'll probably see it evolve further. Like the kind of idea of just splashing red in the deck for one Pyroblast, because they are pinpointing what the deck is weak against and they're working out the piles to beat everything. So yeah.
You know what's a great way to actually beat Meddling Mage?
Oh, Pyroblast.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, true. Something my opponent once did was they predicted themselves on Oracle, put Oracle in the graveyard, and then unearthed it. It's like GG. Yes.
Yeah, this is a really nice one. I think Unearth has like mostly gone to the sidelines now. It's not being played, but if Espervile even becomes either if they don't have an answer for it, game one, which they have the Pyroblast now, but I could see Unearth doing the work there as well.
Yeah.
There's a really cool quote from Ethan that when Thassa's Oracle like was just spoiled, he put like a quote on his Twitter and a chat somewhere. He said, "Thassa's Oracle is the Tendrils of Agony for 2020." I just loved that.
For 2 mana.
So this is the direction combo is probably going.
Oh man, I really want to go. Sometimes I wonder, like, everybody knows me as like the Elves guy. I wonder like how much work would it take for me to become known as the Doomsday guy, because I've always had the most respect for like, I mean respect as a player, or like as more like for the deck. Like I have basically respect for everybody who comes to a tournament who's like genuine and doesn't like want to cheat. Like, you know what I mean with respect, but like with
yep.
It's more like awe and fascination is what I'm getting at. And I have so much for Doomsday because when I got into Legacy, into like the tournament scene, and like 2008, there was this guy, Christopher Alzheimer. If you played Doomsday back then, you know him. And he was considered like one of the 2 or 3 gods of Doomsday, along with Liche and, I don't remember, Emliden. It's one of those names that I've seen online. I never thought about how to pronounce them, going back to the beginning of the show. But he also recently came back and is playing Doomsday again. And those 3 were the gods of Doomsday. And watching Christopher play, it's like, wow. I'll never forget just the pure awe and fascination that I had with watching this guy play and getting out of the craziest situations. And that's always been Doomsday to me. And it's probably going to take a lot of work, and I feel like every other episode we talk about how we both want to try out the deck. I wonder if you're listening to this right now, do you want us to do an episode of Doomsday? Because I know another podcast has actually recently done an episode of Doomsday, and I really try to like make it so that I know you guys, you're not faithful to us, right? You're cheating us. You're listening to all these other Legacy podcasts, and you're like, oh my god, these are so amazing. And we're like, okay, that's fine. We got an open relationship. It's all good. But I don't want you to be like, okay, now let's check out this podcast. And like, they're all of the same topic. But if you want us to do an episode on Doomsday, and I really want to, I think we actually might prepare that, because then I'm really going to go ahead and play the deck myself, and maybe we can have some expert online on for a future podcast. Yeah. So maybe that's something we can do in like a month or something. So let us know in the comments. Let us know on Twitter. Let us know on our Discord. Let us know when you send us like all these awesome letters that I received from our lovers and haters. No. Have you ever received a letter that didn't contain a card from a Magic player? Probably not, right?
No, I'm gonna go with no.
I remember not from a Magic player, but I remember when I played Counter-Strike when I was like 15 or something, like 2000 or something. I didn't really have money for a new computer, so on our IRC channel, my friend put out like IRC. It's basically, well, it's the Discord, but from 20 years ago. And my friend put the topic out there. Well, help Julian, save Julian. Just 10, well, Deutsche Mark back then, and you're part of it. And one of those guys, he actually contacted my friend and asked for my address, and he really just like set it for fun. In the sense of like, oh, his computer is so bad, he can't really play anymore. And that guy literally sent me 10 Deutsche Mark. And he even included a letter where he says, I don't do this to anyone. And the guy didn't even really know me. We just like played one clan war against them, and we lost even. And he just sent me 10 Deutsche Mark. That's cool. To me, to this day, this is like 20 years ago. I still remember that because that was like surreal.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that stands out. That's cool.
But yeah, that's totally off topic at this point. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. By the way, I've just remembered the other guy's name you're thinking of is Brandon Adams.
Yeah, that's his name. And let me look him up so people can actually follow him. Emidln. Oh, come on, guys. Can't you, like, it's Julian. This is so much easier. Emidln. Okay, he's from Chicago.
Yes.
He follows me. I follow him. Follow me, follows you.
Nice. Cool. I'll play some more Doomsday as well.
I shall. I really shall.
Yeah.
And speaking of Twitter, where can people find you on Twitter?
I am at WhiteFacesMTG on Twitter.
Awesome. And it's Julian23 on Twitter. You? People also can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/itsjulian. And also itsjulian.com, the website where basically all of the content I ever do, except for the OnlyFans stuff, goes online. So if you want to find the OnlyFans, that's actually hidden in the source code of the website. Maybe you can find the link to it, and then you can subscribe on there. Shoutouts also to our supporters. We talked about how basically the Legacy community is our sponsor. And I really want to say thank you so much to all of you, for everybody who's in our Discord, hanging out, checking out our streams, making comments on Reddit, on YouTube, anywhere. Thank you so much. Our biggest supporters are on our Eternal Witness tier: Matt Nams, Valerio, James Slack, Victor Bernanst, and Trent Browers, who just joined this week on the Eternal Witness tier. And the big Grizzlebrand tier, we got Baju Bat, Scott Monroe, Kulish Alistay, Jeremy Gates, and also a new arrival, Martin Nielsen, God of Doomsday. And this list is getting so long, maybe we need to add an extra tier. No, I don't want to exclude people from the shoutouts in the end. It's just like, wow, like seriously, guys, you're helping out so much, and it really makes all of this worth it, like sitting in the sun. And well, I guess there's worse things than sitting in the sun and editing a podcast, so who am I to complain, I guess.
Sitting in the sun. Isn't it 12 over there? It's midnight.
Well, yeah, but I'm definitely not going to edit it right now. I usually edit it like during the day.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point.
Awesome.
Cool.
So other ways to support us, like something that really goes a long way is really just leaving a review on iTunes. So if you want to let other people know about this podcast that you're listening to, and you basically want to help out people who go on iTunes and they're like, hey, what's actually like Podcast Magic Legacy, and you want us to pop up there, if you write a review, that really goes a long way. I think we have something like 28 or 30 reviews by now. So if you want to add to that, that's definitely going to increase our how would you call that? Exposure, I want to say. Is that the correct marketing term? I don't know, man.
That is the term, yep.
That's what we're going to call it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what are you going to do now? I kind of want to go to bed, but I can never go to bed after these recordings.
I'm going to paint some Warhammer.
Oh, that's...
I got a bunch of new stuff in today. So
That's really sweet. I guess I'm just going to go outside a bit to cool down because it's... Oh, God. People are going to grow tired of us complaining about the heat, but the heat is insane. It's time for Burn to go
You're becoming English. We just complain about it here, but it is melting over here as well. Yeah, I'm feeling it.
So
might go outside and have a beer.
I hope you guys can just like enjoy the heat, have a good time, and then we'll see you again in a couple of days. Let us know if you want to know about the Doomsday episode, by the way, or if there's any other topic you want us to cover. Unless it's like tree fork control. That's going to be a little bit hard to find somebody who has experience with that, but there's a lot of stuff that you can cover in Legacy. So let us know, and thanks a lot for tuning in. Bye bye.
Goodbye, everyone.